Good afternoon from the KUOW newsroom. This is Seattle Now. I'm Paige Browning. Here's our roundup of today's top stories. It's Tuesday, May 27th. Starting with protest drama in Seattle, officials are keeping eyes on another protest planned for tonight by the fundamentalist religious group Mayday USA. The group is anti-abortion and anti-LGBTQ rights and drew large crowds on Saturday by holding a protest on Seattle's Capitol Hill, leading to dozens of arrests of people who showed up to oppose them. Mayday USA has another rally at Seattle City Hall this evening with plans to demand that Mayor Bruce Harrell apologize for comments he made over the weekend. Harrell called Mayday an extreme right-wing group and said they held their event to intentionally provoke reaction in Seattle's prominent LGBTQ neighborhood. And reaction certainly came. Hundreds of people showed up, and police arrested 23 people protesting against Mayday for assault and other charges. Moving on, townhouses coming to a neighborhood near you. Starting in July, developers will have more freedom to build housing in Seattle than they used to. That is, if the mayor signs new zoning changes passed in the city council today. Joshua McNichols has more.
The new rules would allow 4plexes on every residential lot and 6plexes if they're affordable or near transit. Seattle officials have been discussing those changes for years, but their efforts came up against political and legal resistance, including from neighborhood groups that claimed more housing would hurt trees and parking. State officials argue that one reason home prices have risen so quickly is that cities have dragged their feet on allowing enough new homes. So state legislators went over the heads of cities, forcing them to open up more land to townhomes and small apartment buildings. Recently, Seattle officials have been racing to meet a June 30th deadline assigned by the state. Joshua McNichols, KUOW News.
Pharmacy news today. CVS has extended a lifeline to Bartell Drugs, offering to buy the chain from Rite Aid amid bankruptcy proceedings. But experts say the beloved local pharmacy chain is unlikely to live on in its current form. Monica Nicholsberg reports.
The future is uncertain for about 40 remaining Bartell pharmacies. Bankruptcy filings show plans to close at least 2 Bartells in Snoqualmie and North Bend. CVS didn't answer questions about the fate of the other Bartells, but University of Washington pharmacy professor Dow Downing says CVS isn't likely to maintain the brand.
I think it's a myth that the Bartell legacy can be carried on by them.
In the past, when CVS has acquired small pharmacy chains, it's rebranded them in its own image. Rite Aid bought Bartell's in 2020 and promised to maintain the iconic brand. But Rite Aid has since filed for bankruptcy twice, serving Bartell's up to the highest bidder. Monica Nicholsberg, KUOW News.
From our immigration beat, Port of Seattle commissioners say U.S. Customs and Border Protection has agreed to meet over concerns about how long the agency is detaining people at SeaTac Airport. More from KNKX reporter Freddie Monares.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection policy states detainees should generally not be held for more than 3 days in holding facilities. The Port of Seattle doesn't have jurisdiction over immigration enforcement, but in a joint statement, the 5 commissioners say they expect the federal agency to operate under the law and within its own policies. Recently, an Olympia resident who had moved from the Philippines to the U.S. decades ago had been detained at the airport for more than 4 days. The Seattle Port Commissioners say prolonged detention without appropriate process raises serious concerns and undermines public trust. In an emailed statement, a CBP spokesperson says, in rare instances, it can take longer than 72 hours in order to do an appropriate background check on an individual. The spokesperson says they treat all travelers professionally and with respect. A date for the meeting between port commissioners and Customs and Border Protection officials has yet to be scheduled. In Seattle, I'm Freddie Monares.
Staying with the topic because Seattle, Bellingham, and Yakima have been identified as hot spots for immigration enforcement. That's according to new data from Washington immigrant groups that track ICE activity. Gustavo Sugrero reports.
Since January, the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network says activity has intensified, and they've confirmed at least 103 individual calls where ICE has taken someone into custody. The group is a collaboration of rural and urban religious, ethnic, and legal groups across the state. Those detentions, in addition to worksite raids, bring that number up to at least 157 known ICE arrests in Washington during the Trump administration. The true number is likely higher. KUOW has reached out to ICE for their arrest numbers but has not received a response. But ICE does publish data about the Tacoma immigration lockup. It shows the average daily population there has increased by nearly 300 people from January to May. More than half of the people held there are listed non-criminals. But that's not a direct correlation to local arrests, since people are transferred to and from the Tacoma facility from other states. Gustavo Sagrero, KUOW News.
Science and health news, where things are in flux today. More than 250,000 people in Washington state could lose their health care under the federal budget that has passed the House of Representatives. Dr. Jesus Iniguez is a doctor at CMAR Community Health Centers in South King County. He says cutting off health insurance is bad for people's individual health, but also expensive for the healthcare system.
There are statistics on uninsured patients. They die quicker. They are sicker when they access care. And instead of paying $10 to get diabetic medications, we have to pay $10,000 for a foot amputation.
A congressional analysis found that under the budget passed by the House, nearly 280,000 people in Washington state would lose their coverage. It now goes to the Senate. On to science. The Trump administration is proposing a 55% cut in National Science Foundation funding. Northwest Public Broadcasting's Lauren Patterson has more on how that could impact the Northwest.
U.S. Senator Maria Cantwell of Washington led a virtual news conference with scientific leaders from around the country to discuss how the slash of funds could affect U.S. industry. She says the big ones are aerospace, AI, and quantum research.
We are in an age where there are several areas of U.S. competitiveness that depend on continued science innovation.
She's working on building grassroots support with her congressional peers to oppose the cuts. In Washington, NSF grants totaling $28 million have been canceled, along with $12 million in Oregon and nearly $6 million in Idaho, according to GrantWatch. I'm Lauren Patterson, reporting.
Another cut to know about, a planned South Seattle food hub meant to help fight hunger has been canceled. Sponsors say unreliable federal funding is to blame. The Seattle Times reports that Food Lifeline was going to open it next year. The feds gave $4 million toward the effort, but Food Lifeline says the possibility of having those grants clawed back would be devastating to the group's other work. Finally today, NBA legend Shawn Kemp in court. Kemp has pleaded guilty to second-degree assault over a shooting incident 2 years ago. The Seattle Times reports he's accused of firing at two men in a car outside the Tacoma Mall while trying to collect items stolen from him in a car prowl. No one was injured. The two men he approached had criminal records and are currently serving their own prison sentences, according to the newspaper. Kemp entered his plea in Pierce County Superior Court on Monday. The cannabis entrepreneur and former Supersonic star faces sentencing in August. Next time on Seattle Now, Seattle's only RV lot where people can park overnight and legally live in the RV is shutting down to make way for a pickleball complex.
I think this article got some attention because it's kind of an oniony headline,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of symbolic of what's happened in Seattle over the last decade or two.
Hear more from Seattle Times homelessness reporter Greg Kim Wednesday morning. That's all for today from the KUOW newsroom in Seattle. Our producer is Andy Hurst, and I'm Paige Browning. Seattle Now and KUOW are members of the NPR network. See ya.